Nana Shastra Vicharanai Kalipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manya Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nande Namataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyaga Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyaga Shri Jiva Gopalako. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the three worlds, and they're worth taking shelter of because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shivati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Chatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubyas cha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So Hare Krishna devotees, one and all. And this evening we are moving on to Nectar of Devotion, chapter 11, which is titled Aspects of Transcendental Service. And the first one, as we see here, it's number 47 in the overall list, is servitorship. So, it's a little, maybe slightly complicated idea, not too much, maybe not exactly what you'd expect entirely. Srila Prabhupada begins with the first paragraph there. In the opinion of the karamis, fruit of workers, offering the results of karma is called servitorship. But according to Vaishnava acharyas like Rupa Goswami, servitorship means constant engagement in some kind of service to the Lord. So it's not specifically pointed out here clearly, although one might well pick it up by just reading carefully. But here in this section on servitorship, there are descriptions of two types of servitorship. Two types. The first, just at least in technical terms, Sanskrit language, is called karmarpanam. Karma, of course, meaning work generally. Karmapanam, which means basically offering one's activities to the Lord. And then there's a second variety, and the technical Sanskrit term is kainkaryam. It's sort of based on the term kinkara, which we came across earlier, if you remember, in the very beginning of the description of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, what was said to be, you could say, like the main rule. The main rule. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And all the other rules, they are kinkaras. They're friends. Kinkara means friend, but in the mood of service, like a lower level friend. Yeah. So kainkaryam means serving in the mood of a personal attendant. And although this is not specifically pointed out so clearly in the text here, but we'll show you, and I think you'll get the idea. So, okay. So now the first, well, what is it now? What would you say? It's paragraph 2, basically. Paragraph 2 is talking about the first type of servitorship, karmarpanam. Karma, of course, generally meaning at least one's material duties. And arpanam, I don't know if you remember the term arpanam from Bhagavad Gita, means to offer. To offer. Yeah, so karmarpanam, offering one's activities, one's duties, like that. Yes, so, like we pointed out, as Prabhupada has pointed out, in the first paragraph, there is some type of, like a little dichotomy or disagreement, two opinions as to what is really servitorship. The fruit of workers, they say you just offer the results of your fruit of activity, whereas the Vaishnavacharyas like Rupa Goswami, they say it means real engagement, constant engagement, he says, in some kind of service to the Lord. But here in the second paragraph, big paragraph, Srila Prabhupada basically presents both. Yeah. And in fact, arguably, he focuses more perhaps on the first idea of the karamis, the fruit of workers, offering the results of their work to the Lord, and that being arguably permissible or includable under the heading of servitorship in Krishna consciousness, because these things are being offered to the Lord, not to some demigod or someone like that. So Srila Prabhupada elaborates on all this in this fairly substantial paragraph. So Skanda Purana is authoritative. And it says, right at the beginning of that paragraph, those who are attached to ritualistic activities means materialistic activities, and varnashram, they can be considered devotees. This is an opinion from Skanda Purana, and of course Skanda Purana, it's Purana, so you can't can't be too skeptical about the Skanda Purana. But then Prabhupada expands the point that when those same people who are considered devotees in terms of Skanda Purana, when they're actually engaged in offering direct service to the Lord, then they can be considered Bhagavats or pure devotees. In other words, they're better situated in servitorship. The others who are involved in the more ritualistic, ceremonial, and fruitive types of activities, but offering them to the Lord, that's servitorship, but on a lower level. And Prabhupada goes on that such people who are engaged in these fruitive activities, varnashram, they're not really pure devotees. They're kind of mixed devotees, something along those lines. But because they're offering the result to the Lord, therefore, okay, they can be considered devotees, and then they fall under this heading of servitorship as an anga of devotional service. But then Prabhupada again goes on, he keeps going a little bit back and forth between these two categories of people with their two different perspectives. But when a person has given up whatever desires they had for fruitive activities and they're just serving the Lord out of love, then they're pure devotees. That is, again, it's a better level of servitorship. And then back again, the conditioned souls. They want to lord it over material nature. And so varnashram, etc., those things are there. So they can enjoy in this world, but become elevated. Yes. So then they become engaged in varnashram, etc. And particularly, when a person's engaged in varnashram, there are many things which are actually devotional service to the Lord. So those devotees who are householders accept Vedic ritualistic performances as well as the prescribed duties of devotional service, because both are meant for satisfying Krishna. Yeah, different things like, it can certainly be argued like the samskars. Every now and then I feed a child their first grains. And of course it's prasadam, it's mahaprasadam, and the family are devotees. I'd say in every case, actually. But in principle, or at least the background of that sort of activity, it's a bit more on the material side. Yeah, all these samskars, first hair cutting, Haribol. It's kind of the name giving, all these things. They're sort of a little, at least there's potential for them to be quite mixed. And indeed, they're done in just purely materialistic ways by people who are not actually devotees, people coming in the Vedic tradition. They do these things. So devotees who are householders, they do some of these things as well as purely Krishna conscious activities. Yeah. And therefore, Prabhupada concludes the paragraph. As we've previously discussed, any activity aimed at satisfying the Supreme Lord, it's considered devotional service. It's okay. Yeah. So then we go on. Yeah. So again, it's the same point in the next paragraph. It's basically the same point, that there may be a sort of like a progression. Someone who they're not really engaged nicely in devotional service, but they're kind of ready for it. And they've been through these other things, material activities, offering them to the Lord. But now someone's really a bit more ready for serious devotional service. So such people who are neophytes, they've developed a little love of God, and they're not interested in activities of sense gratification in proportion to their devotion. That's an interesting point in and of itself. Well worthy of note that generally speaking, in principle, when one is trying to practice Krishna consciousness, then one's loss of interest in sense gratification, one's just becoming disenchanted and losing the desire to be bothered with activities of sense gratification, this happens in proportion to the development of their devotion, not the other way round. Not the other way round. That as they develop their detachment, then as a result, their devotion develops. And as Prabhupada says, well, there's still some attraction, but not so much. There's still some attraction for sense gratifying activities, and that should be offered to the Lord. And this is also engagement in the service of the Lord, with the Lord as the master and the worker as the servant. Then devotees, as we mentioned, well, as in fact I must say, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's the second level, you could say, of servitorship, which is serving in the mood of a personal attendant. And that's definitely deeper. And the very last little paragraph there is referring to that, is discussing that. Serving in the mood of a personal attendant. And in fact, what Prabhupada is paraphrasing there is a very famous verse from Naradiya Purana, and it appears here and there, like in Prabhupada's purports and so on. Iha yasya hare dasye karmana manasagira nikhilas vapyavastasu jivan mukta sauchyate. I wonder, have you heard that verse before? Anyway, it is a well-known verse. And the translation, well, let me just read the translation as it appears in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 11, verse 89. A person acting in the service of Krishna with body, mind, intelligence, and words is a liberated person, even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. So this illustrates how a devotee in the Kainkariam stage, serving in the mood of more like a personal attendant rather than at a distance and just offering something. So how such a devotee is constantly engaged in serving with every way possible, mind, body, words, not just doing some duties and offering the result. Right, so now, for those of you who are doing the Bhakti Shastri, here's a special question. And so, yeah, please note this. First of all, Srimad Bhagavatam 1-16 is quoted. 1-16. Make a note of that. And this is just the translation. O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Okay, and I think you're going to get a question in the Bhakti Shastri about what do you achieve, what do you gain when you serve the devotees who are completely freed from all vice. Yeah, and you know what you gain? You gain an affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva, Krishna. Not Vasudeva, Vasudeva, Krishna. So we move on now to point number 48, devotional service in friendship. And let us just point out here also an interesting little point. Oh, well, it's mentioned, all right, it's mentioned in the text there, but let us just point it out anyway and maybe clarify it a little. That there are two aspects or even two types of friends or two types of friendships with Krishna, as mentioned here in the first paragraph. The first is to act as the confidential servant of the Lord. Yeah. Or perhaps more literally, and I think the point will become clearer as we go through the section and have a look at particularly particularly the first example given. The first type of friend, the technical term is Vishwas. Vishwas. And a Vishwas friend of the Lord is not just a confidential servant, but has confidence in the Lord as the benefactor, the one who will look after us. And the second type of friend is called Mitra. Mitra. And this is, well, Nectar of Devotion says, it acts as a well-wisher. It's sort of, this Nectar of Devotion in some places is not well edited, but really the idea is more like an equal of the Lord. or even well-wisher, as at least Prabhupada used the term, well-wisher means someone who's superior to you. The well-wisher is a superior. Yeah, so the mitra has a friendly relationship, at least as an equal, maybe apparently a superior. Yeah. Okay. So, right, then let's go into the subject matter here. And Prabhupada makes a very nice point at the end of the first paragraph. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord accepts a preacher as the most dear servant. Anyone who's preaching the confidential message of the Gita to the people in general is so dear to Krishna that no one can be equal to him in human society. You know, Srila Prabhupada said, I hope this won't be controversial, but Prabhupada said that anyone who dedicates themselves to preaching Krishna consciousness in the Muslim countries, Prabhupada said, I will take the dust from his feet and place it on my head. Hare Krishna. Anyway, let's go in now to paragraph 2, which is exploring the subject of the Thevishwas friend in the context of that friend being someone who has confidence in the Lord as the benefactor, that I don't need to worry, he's going to look after me. And so the example is given of Draupadi. In Mahabharata, she says, my dear Govinda, your promise is that your devotee can never be vanquished. I believe in that statement. And therefore, in all kinds of tribulations, I simply remember your promise, and thus I live. So it's not exactly, I mean, you can say she's like a confidential servant, but it's not perhaps exactly as the term, that term is used in our literatures, but it is more in the sense of having confidence in the Lord. Yes, because anyway, Prabhupada goes to some lengths there to explain the background, the whole story. I think you all know the whole story, how the Pandavas were exiled and they were mistreated in so many ways. And Prabhupada says that the tribulations, the difficulties they faced were so severe that even Bhishma Dev, who was both a lifelong brahmachari and a great warrior, would sometimes shed tears thinking of them. Yeah, but Draupadi was not discouraged. She always maintained confidence that because Krishna is our friend, ultimately he'll look after us. Maybe you know the story how in the Rajasuya Yajna of Maharaj Yudhisthira, how Krishna killed Shishupal with the Sudarshan chakra. And to do that, he very quickly pulled it out. Like you could hardly see his hand moving. His hand was moving so fast. Pulled it out, aimed and threw it just like that. And that was the end of Shishupal. And indeed, he did it so quickly. And the Sudarshan chakra is so sharp that Krishna's finger was cut. Krishna's finger was cut, and some blood was coming. And Draupadi was right there. And Draupadi, seeing that, took one end of her sari and ripped off a piece of cloth and wrapped it around Krishna's finger. And in that way, it wasn't an extremely serious wound, but she rendered some service there and offered one piece of her sari. And Krishna thanked her and said, one day when you need this type of help, don't worry, I will provide it for you. And so then when Draupadi was being undressed, or they were trying to undress her in the assembly of all the big Kshatriyas, and Dushasana was pulling her sari away, Krishna incarnated as an endless sari, as a reciprocation for that offering of that piece of cloth. So you see, she had that confidence, and she only gave just a little strip of cloth, and Krishna incarnated as an endless sari, just meters and tens of meters of sari. Aha, okay. Now let's have a look here. What is it now? Well, let's see. Just an interesting point, which is brought up by Srila Rupa Goswami, but is not mentioned, not really pointed out here, you might say. Different friends have different, in their friendship, there are different degrees of faith. Rupa Goswami says that there's first of all Shraddha, preliminary faith, and then Vishwas, again the term Vishwas, mature faith in Krishna, in this context of having confidence. Krishna will look after me. So Shraddha is the simple faith necessary for beginning to engage in devotional service, but Draupadi's faith is mature, Vishwas, mature faith, as is the faith displayed by the devotee in the, what is it now? Third paragraph. This is also mature faith. In friendship, in a friendly mood, So, my dear King, a person who never deviates even for a moment from engagement in service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Person, engagement which is sought even by great demigods like Indra, with firm conviction that there's nothing more worshipable or desirable than this, is called the first-class devotee. In other words, the confidence, the faith, which is underpinning the friendship is very strong, mature. Then in paragraph 4, there is this other, the preliminary type of faith, Shraddha. Rupa Goswami says that a neophyte devotee who has simply developed a slight love of Godhead is certainly a prospective candidate for devotional service. When he becomes firmly fixed in such devotional service, that assured status becomes a confidential part of his devotional service, or in other words, that confidence becomes a very prominent part and very profound part of his devotional service. Then, now, in the last paragraph, this is the example of the second type of friend mentioned. The second type of friend we read is something like at least an equal and possibly even a superior. In other words, this is more like a Raganuga type of relationship, not dependent on rules and regulations. Prabhupada says, sometimes it's found that a pure devotee lies down in the temple of the Lord in order to serve him as a confidential friend. Such friendly behavior of a devotee may be accepted as Raganuga or spontaneous, although according to regulative principles, no one can lie down in the temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This spontaneous love of Godhead may be grouped. Anyway, this manifestation of this mood can be grouped under devotional service in friendship, but not like Draupadi, a dependent. Draupadi is a dependent, but she a fully confident dependent, but still a dependent. This type of devotee is more like a senior or at the least an equal, and is therefore able to act in much sort of more liberal, freer ways. Let's go on to surrendering everything to the Lord. And let's see. Anyway, at the bottom of the first paragraph, Prabhupada says, it's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that as soon as a person surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna, Krishna takes charge of him and gives him a guarantee of protection from all sinful reactions. So we all know that verse, Sarvadharman Parityaja. He also instructs from within so that the devotee may very quickly make advancement towards spiritual perfection. Now, devotees, in the second paragraph, it is pointed out actually that there are 3 types of surrender, which are described here in different of the verses being quoted. Well, yeah, okay. Anyway, maybe it's not actually so clear. But the way it's described, Rupa Goswami describes that the term for self-surrender is Atma Nivedana. Okay, that's self-surrender. So self can be differently defined. And therefore the idea is that in terms of how you define the self-surrender can be differently defined. I don't know if that makes sense. But Prabhupada says, self is sometimes considered to refer to the spirit self, the soul, but sometimes to the mind, sometimes to the body. Yeah. So the thing is, if Atma, because Nivedana means surrender. Atma, if Atma means the body, for example, then Atma Nivedana, the term mentioned here, means full bodily surrender. If we take Atma to mean the mind, then Atmanivedanam means full mental surrender. And if Atma refers to the spirit self, then Atmanivedanam means full surrender of yourself, self-identity. And Prabhupada Quotes refers to a very nice song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Perhaps you're familiar with it. Manasa deha geha yo kichu more apilun tuapade nandakishore. Manasa, my mind. Deha, well, that means my body. And geha, my household affairs. Yo kichu more, whatever is mine. My dear Lord, apilun, I surrender to you. Apilun, tuapade, at your lotus feet, Nandakishore. And now you can do what you like. Yeah. So now, in the third paragraph, this is Yamunacharya, and he is now offering surrender of the soul. It's that particular version of self-surrender, when self means the soul. So he says, I may be living within some body. In other words, I'm a spirit soul, but I may be living within a body as a human being or whatever, but I don't mind. Whatever. I'm just going to surrender myself to you. And then in the next fourth paragraph, Hari Bhakti Vivek, here Atma Nivedanam is referring to, or Atma is taken to mean the body. Yes. So therefore, as a sold out animal, I've given up my body, and yeah, like this. Body and soul even. Yeah. So the surrender of the mind, well, there's not exactly an example given, but anyway, I think we can appreciate the point. So then, in the last paragraph, an important point is made that devotional service in friendship and devotional service in self-surrender are two difficult processes. Therefore, such relationships with the Lord can very rarely be seen. Only for the advanced devotees are these two processes easily executed. The purport is that it's very rare to see surrender which is mixed with sincere ecstatic devotion. One must give himself completely to the will of the Lord. All right. So we got a few more, but they're briefer. Offering a favorite article. There's a quotation there from the 11th canto. Which refers to offering a favorite article, offering one of your favorite articles to the Lord. But actually there are two types. There are two types, at least according to Rupa Goswami. There are two types of offerings of favorite articles. One is offering your own favorite article to the Lord, and the other is offering to the Lord his favorite article, not just your favorite article. So there's a little distinction made there. And 51, performing all endeavors for Krishna. So the point here is that, well, it's a nice point in that it basically means Anyone can do this. Anyone can practice this anga or follow this rule of devotional service. Prabhupada says that at the end, for example, a devotee who has a great establishment or factory may offer the fruits of such a material possession for the service of the Lord. Yeah. Or Arjuna, he fought for the Lord. That was a particular sphere of his life, and so he performed that activity for the Lord. Or someone else, someone who's a doctor can cure the devotees of the Lord, and so they're acting in that sphere of their life for the satisfaction of the Lord. So as much as possible, we should perform the prescribed duties of devotional service, as mentioned in Shastra, and as much as possible, offer our own duties in our practical lives to Krishna. Oh, and we have a special question here also. Look at this. So, there's a verse, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 40, which says, in this endeavor there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So what verse is this? Anyway, you better memorize it, devotees. It's chapter 2, verse 40. Yeah. Naya vikramanashosti pratyavayana vijite salpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahatobayat. Being a surrendered soul. So, you might think, it might sound like this is a repeat of what we just read just a couple of minutes ago, surrendering everything to the Lord, Atma Nivedanam, and now we have being a surrendered soul. The thing is, but there's a subtle difference. You could maybe make a note of this. It's an interesting point. Because, oftentimes, there are a number of repetitions amongst all these angas and rules. There's a number. In a day or two, we will note those repetitions. Some of them are simply repetitions. Others are kind of repetitions, but with subtle differences. And this is the case here. Atma Nivedana means surrendering, your body, your mind, your soul. But now here, the Sanskrit term is sharanapati. Sharanapati, which means considering oneself to be completely subservient to and protected by the Lord. In other words, Atma Nivedana means it's more or less like self-dedication. You dedicate yourself to the Lord. But that could be done without feelings of subservience or dependence. It's possible. And an example, it's not actually given here, but just out of interest. An example of someone who performed Atma Nivedanam, who surrendered body, mind, and words, was Bali Maharaj. He manifested a mood of subservient dependence on the Lord. His attitude was different. So here we get, there are a couple of examples given. My dear Lord, Hari Bhakti, the person who surrendered himself unto you, who is in firm conviction that he is yours, and who actually acts in that way by his body, mind, and words, can actually relish transcendental bliss. He's not just dedicated his body, but as far as he's concerned, I belong to Krishna. So there's dedication, a deeper sense of dedication. And in the Nishinga Purana, anyone who prays unto me and takes shelter of me becomes my ward. And I protect him always from all sorts of calamities. Ward means, generally ward is used for a child, like a child who is adopted. Yeah, that a person accepts them as their ward means they take full responsibility, and that the child is in their hands, like the life of the child is in the hands of that person. And oh gosh, here's another special question about being a surrendered soul. Make a note of this. Chaitanya Charitamrita, verse 137, Antya Lila 3, 137, purport. Although Krishna wants everyone to surrender to his lotus feet, because of people's sinful activities, they cannot do this. Nevertheless, if they begin chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and rendering service unto the Tulsi plant, or maybe this is connected with Tulsi, but anyway, okay, Tulsi plant, and let's see, where are we? They will very soon be able to surrender. One's real duty is to surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna. But if one is unable to do so, he should adopt this process as introduced by Sri Chaitanya. So what is the process they should adopt? Chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and rendering service to Tulsi. Yeah, all right. This is the way to achieve success in Krishna consciousness. So note that, you devotees. And finally, number 53, serving trees, such as Tulsi, particularly Tulsi. So right in the beginning, in the first 10, was about serving trees, and actually banyan was mentioned, but it was in a broad sense, trees, sacred trees, banyan, peepal, tulsi. But here, this is specifically serving Tulsi. And through doing this, Tulsi is focused on in different ways. That you can offer obeisances, you can see, you can touch, you can pour water, you can sow the seeds and grow from seed, you can offer the leaves. Through all these things, one develops Krishna prema. That's from the first paragraph. And then in the second paragraph, there's a nice verse from Skanda Purana. is auspicious in all respects, simply by seeing, simply by touching, simply by remembering, simply by praying to, simply by bowing before, simply by growing this tree. There's always auspiciousness. Anyone who comes in touch with the Tulsi tree in the above mentioned ways lives eternally in the Vaikuntha world. And we could just mention a subtle but important point about Tulsi. Tulsi is directly an associate of Krishna from Goloka Vrindavan. Yes, but she's such an exalted and extraordinary transcendental person, she can expand in vast numbers of forms, huge numbers, in so many different places all over the spiritual world and even all over the material world. And indeed, well, anyway, she's on the altar, we'll see in a few minutes. So that Tulsi here is the same Tulsi who is there in Goloka Vrindavan. It's not like an expansion, an incarnation or something. This is directly Tulsi Devi herself in person, in a living form by our standards, a regular living form by our standards of what's a living form. Of course, we know the deities, Radha Radhanath, they're living. They're alive. They're not statues. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is present. Srimati Radharani is present. Lord Chaitanya, Govardhan, they're present and they're alive. But not exactly in our terms, as we are living bodies of this material world. So therefore, and Tulsi has been doing this. Krishna was here 5,000 years ago. Tulsi has been here since then. All over so many places. They're just talking about this planet. So, yeah, in this way, Tulsi is a very special person. The only remaining living in our terms, living personal associate of the Lord, who is here giving us her association in our terms, not just, special transcendental terms, but in our terms. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Hare Krishna.